Welcome to On Call with Dr. Anselm Anyoha. Today's episode was inspired by a recent moment in my clinic that stayed with me. A 9-month-old infant was brought in by his mother for a routine well-child checkup. As I spoke with her, something about the baby immediately caught my attention. He wasn't fussy or disengaged. Instead, he was quietly alert. His eyes moved back and forth between his mother and me, as if he were carefully studying our faces. He tracked my movements around the room and seemed deeply interested in what was happening. This kind of focused attention, watching faces, following movement, and responding to social cues, is an important sign of healthy social and emotional development at around 9 months of age. It tells us that the infant is beginning to understand people, relationships, and the world around them. In simple terms, the baby is not just seeing, but connecting. In this episode, we'll explore what this level of early social sophistication looks like, why it matters for a child's overall development, and when parents should feel reassured or concerned about what they are seeing in their own child. And yes, sometimes a quiet baby is actually a very busy thinker.
Dr. Anyoha, you use the term social sophistication when describing a 9-month-old. That's not a phrase parents usually hear at the playground. What exactly do you mean by social sophistication at this age?
That's a great question. And you're right, it sounds like a big word for such a small person. But at 9 months, infants are actually far more socially aware than many people realize. This is a stage when babies are actively discovering the world and learning how to interact with it, not just physically, but socially and emotionally as well. At this age, babies begin to practice something we call joint attention. This means they start to look where their caregivers are looking and share interest in the same object or person. If a parent points to a toy, a dog, or even another child, the baby follows that gaze. That shared focus is a building block for later communication, learning, and even language. They also engage in what we call social referencing. This is when an infant looks to a caregiver's face or body language to decide how to respond to a new or uncertain situation. In other words, the baby is asking, "Is this safe? Is this okay?" Let me give a simple example. If Uncle Joe walks into the room, the baby may pause and look at the mother's face before reacting. If the mother smiles and appears relaxed, the baby feels reassured and may smile back, reach out, or engage. But if the mother looks tense or concerned, the baby may pull back or avoid interaction. The baby is using the caregiver's emotional cues as a guide. This ability to read facial expressions, body language, and emotional signals shows a surprisingly advanced level of social awareness. It tells us that the infant is not only observing the world, but actively interpreting it. And that's a very important milestone in early development.
Why is a baby's attention to their surroundings and this idea of joint attention such an important developmental milestone?
Attention to the environment and interest in what other people are looking at are incredibly important because they form the foundation for how children learn, communicate, and eventually make sense of the world around them. When a baby is able to follow a caregiver's gaze or share interest in the same object or person, that's what we call joint attention. This simple act, looking together, may seem small, but it is one of the earliest building blocks of communication. It tells us that the infant is beginning to understand that experiences can be shared. Parents naturally use these moments to teach and engage with their babies, often without even realizing it. When a baby and caregiver are focused on the same thing, learning happens almost effortlessly. This shared focus is especially important for language development because words are usually learned in context, not in isolation. For example, if a cat walks into the room and the infant notices it at the same time the mother does, the mother might say, "Look, that's a cat." The baby may not repeat the word, but the brain is making connections between the object, the sound of the word, and the shared experience. That simple moment becomes a language lesson. If the infant had not shown interest in the cat or followed the mother's attention, that teaching moment might never have occurred. So joint attention creates opportunities for learning, interaction, and connection. Over time, these small shared moments add up and support speech, understanding, and social development well into toddlerhood and beyond. In short, when babies learn to pay attention to us, they're learning how to learn.
And what about the concept of social referencing? What does that look like in everyday life for a baby?
Social referencing is the process by which infants look to their caregivers' facial expressions, tone of voice, and body language to decide what to do next, whether to move forward, pause, or pull back from a situation. In simple terms, babies are constantly checking in with their parents and caregivers to answer one very important question. Is this safe? They don't have words yet, so they rely on emotional cues. A calm face, a smile, or relaxed body language tells the baby it's okay to explore. A tense expression, a frown, or a worried tone signals caution. Through social referencing, children learn how to navigate their environment. They begin to understand which situations are safe, which ones require care, and how to respond emotionally. This helps them explore the world with confidence while still knowing when to slow down. This process is also an early form of emotional intelligence. By reading and responding to caregivers' emotions, infants start learning how feelings guide behavior. Babies who develop strong social referencing skills are often better prepared to interact with others, regulate their own responses, and form secure, trusting relationships as they grow. So, when a baby looks at your face before taking that next step, literally or figuratively, they're not being hesitant. They're being thoughtful.
Is it concerning if a 9-month-old doesn't seem interested in their surroundings or doesn't appear to read parental cues?
That's an important question, and the answer requires both attentiveness and balance. Not every baby develops in exactly the same way, but by around 9 months, most infants show curiosity about their environment and some interest in people around them. If an infant consistently appears tuned out, shows little interest in what's happening around them, or does not engage in joint attention, such as following a caregiver's gaze or sharing interest in objects, that can raise concern. Similarly, a lack of social referencing, meaning the baby does not look to a caregiver's face or body language for guidance before engaging with people or situations, may suggest a delay in social development. These behaviors don't automatically mean something is wrong, but they are signals worth paying attention to. Delays in these early social skills can sometimes be early signs of developmental conditions, including autism spectrum disorder. The key point is early recognition. Identifying concerns at this stage allows for early evaluation and, when needed, early intervention. And we know from decades of research that early support can significantly improve developmental outcomes for children. So this isn't about panic, it's about awareness. When parents notice something that doesn't feel quite right, that instinct is worth honoring and discussing with a pediatrician. Early conversations can make a very big difference.
How do you assess a baby's social and emotional development during a clinic visit?
A large part of the assessment happens simply through observation. I spent a few minutes watching how the infant interacts with the people and the environment around them. I pay attention to how they respond to me, how they engage with their caregiver, and how curious they seem about what's happening in the room. I look for things like, do they follow my gaze when I look at an object? Do they shift their attention between me and their parent while I'm speaking? Do they respond to facial expressions, smiling back, looking curious, or showing concern when something changes? Parents also play an important role in this process. We often use brief questionnaires that parents fill out to help capture day-to-day social and emotional behaviors that may not fully show up during a short office visit. These tools can help identify children who may be lagging in certain areas. That said, direct observation is invaluable. Those few minutes of watching how a baby connects, reacts, and communicates, often without a single word spoken, give me a real sense of the child's social and emotional capacity. Sometimes a baby tells you a great deal simply by how they look, watch, and engage.
What things can affect how a baby participates during these kinds of assessments?
A baby's mood and physical state play a big role. Just like adults, infants don't perform at their best when they're hungry, tired, uncomfortable, or not feeling well. A baby who needs a nap or a feeding may not be interested in engaging with a clinician, no matter how friendly or animated we try to be. That's why context is so important during an assessment. If a baby doesn't show certain expected behaviors in the clinic, I always ask myself whether the timing was right. Were they overdue for a nap? Was it close to feeding time? Were they overstimulated by a new environment? One moment of limited engagement is usually not a cause for concern. What matters more is the pattern over time. If a baby repeatedly shows little interest in people or their surroundings across different settings, at home, in childcare, and during clinic visits, that is more concerning and deserves closer evaluation. So, we try to see the whole picture. A single off day is just that, an off day. But consistent lack of engagement is a signal we should take seriously and explore further.
What steps should parents take if they notice delays in their infant's social or emotional development?
The first and most important step is to talk with your pediatrician or primary healthcare provider. Parents know their children best, and if something doesn't feel quite right, that concern deserves attention. A pediatrician can listen carefully, observe the child, and guide the next steps. Parents can also reach out directly to early intervention services. In the United States, every state has a Birth to 3 program designed specifically to support infants and toddlers with developmental concerns. These programs specialize in early development and provide comprehensive evaluations to better understand the child's strengths and areas where support may be needed. If services are recommended, the therapies are tailored to the child, often involving speech, occupational, physical, or developmental therapy, depending on the child's needs. Just as importantly, these programs work closely with families, showing parents how to support development during everyday routines at home. Early intervention is incredibly powerful. The brain is most adaptable in the first few years of life, and acting early can significantly improve social, emotional, and cognitive outcomes. So seeking help early is not a sign of failure. It's a proactive step that gives children the best possible start.
What role does hearing play when evaluating a child with delayed social or emotional development?
Hearing plays a crucial role and is one of the first things we make sure to assess. Confirming that an infant can hear and hear well is a foundational part of evaluating any child with social or emotional concerns. A baby who does not optimally may appear disengaged, unresponsive, socially withdrawn, not because of a social delay, but simply because they are missing important sounds and cues in their environment. If a child cannot clearly hear voices, they may not respond to their name, follow verbal interactions, or engage in back and forth communication. Hearing is also closely tied to language development. Children learn words by hearing them repeatedly in meaningful contexts. When hearing is impaired, learning spoken language becomes much more difficult, which can then affect social interaction and emotional connection. That's why hearing screening and, when needed, formal hearing tests are a routine part of evaluating infants and young children with social and emotional delays. Before we can fully understand a child's development, we must first ensure that they are receiving the sounds and information they need. In short, good hearing supports language, communication, social engagement, and overall development. Making sure a child can hear well helps us see the full picture and ensures we're addressing the right concerns from the very beginning.
Can you give an example that really shows how sophisticated a 9-month-old can be?
Absolutely. By this age, many infants have developed an understanding that an object doesn't disappear just because it's out of sight. We call this object permanence, and it's a major cognitive milestone. For example, if I hide my stethoscope behind the baby's back or under a cloth, a 9-month-old infant will often track my hand with their eyes and then try to find where the object went. They may twist their body, reach around, or look back as if to say, "I know it's still here somewhere." This behavior shows more than just improving motor skills. It reflects growing cognitive ability, curiosity, and problem solving. It also has a social element. The baby is paying attention to what another person is doing and trying to make sense of it. These infants are curious, persistent, and eager to explore. They're not just interacting with objects, they're trying to understand cause and effect, intention, and shared experiences. In many ways, this is how learning begins, through watching, wondering, and actively seeking answers.
What's your final message to parents about social development at 9 months?
9-month-olds are far more socially sophisticated than many caregivers realize. They want to see what their parents are looking at. They pay close attention to facial expressions, and they explore their environment with genuine curiosity and purpose. These early social skills are not small things. They are the foundation for language development, emotional intelligence, and the ability to form healthy relationships later in life. Parents, pediatricians, and other child health providers should look closely for signs of social disengagement or a lack of interest in people and surrounding activities. While every child develops at their own pace, consistent absence of these behaviours may signal delays in social and emotional development and deserve further attention. The good news is that early intervention truly works. Simple steps, such as hearing evaluations and timely referrals to early intervention or specialised support programs, can make a profound difference in a child's developmental trajectory. Thank you for joining me on Call with Dr. Anselm Anyoha. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with friends and family, especially those with infants approaching this important milestone. Until next time, stay informed, stay compassionate, and take a moment to appreciate the remarkable sophistication of even the youngest children.